The world is watching closely as the United States makes one of its boldest military moves in recent years. The Southern Caribbean, usually a quiet arena of maritime trade and fishing routes, has now become the center of international tension as reports circulate that thousands of elite American paratroopers have been deployed near Venezuela. Whether this is an official full-scale operation or a carefully calculated show of force, the fact remains that the U.S. military is building pressure in a way that cannot be ignored. For decades, Venezuela has been a hotspot of political drama, economic collapse, and rising criminal activity, but what is unfolding now is being framed by many as the beginning of a new era in U.S. regional engagement. American audiences are wondering, is this about drugs, is it about regime change, or is it about sending a message to adversaries worldwide? The first thing to understand is the scale of what is happening. Naval task forces have moved into position in the Caribbean with guided missile destroyers, amphibious assault ships carrying Marines, and even a nuclear-powered submarine. The deployment of stealth F-35 fighter jets to Puerto Rico only adds another layer of firepower, showing that the United States is not limiting this operation to sea patrols alone but preparing the skies for dominance as well. On top of that, the news of thousands of paratroopers either being staged or readied for rapid deployment has shocked observers because paratroopers are not usually sent unless there is a possibility of boots on the ground. To Americans, the image of paratroopers has always been associated with decisive action, from the beaches of Normandy to the rugged mountains of Afghanistan. Hearing that they may now be standing by near Venezuela immediately raises the stakes in the minds of the public. The official line from Washington is that this buildup is aimed at countering narco-terrorism and dismantling the networks of dangerous gangs like Tren de Aragua and the Cartel de los Soles. These groups, according to U.S. officials, have expanded their reach far beyond Venezuela and Colombia, using smuggling routes that stretch into Central America, the Caribbean, and ultimately into the United States itself. Drug trafficking has long been declared a national security issue, and by sending such a large and sophisticated force, the United States appears to be signaling that the time for half measures is over. However, for many American viewers, the question lingers, if this is only about drug cartels, why does it take warships, stealth fighters, and elite paratroopers to deal with the threat? To answer that, one has to consider the broader picture. Venezuela under Nicolas Maduro has been a thorn in Washington's side for years. Its government is aligned with powers like Russia, China, and Iran, providing a foothold for America's rivals in the Western Hemisphere. Maduro has used the narrative of imperialism to rally his supporters, claiming that the U.S. wants to topple his regime and seize Venezuela's oil wealth. By placing thousands of troops, aircraft, and naval assets close to Venezuelan waters, Washington is sending an unmistakable message to Caracas that its tolerance for instability and international crime has limits. This is where the idea of elite paratroopers plays a powerful role. Even if no invasion is currently planned, the psychological effect of knowing that rapid deployment forces could land within hours creates pressure on Maduro's government and its allies. From the American perspective, the deployment also serves as reassurance to the public that national security is being taken seriously. The U.S. has dealt with waves of fentanyl, cocaine, and other drugs flooding communities, and politicians across the spectrum have promised to crack down on the criminal networks responsible. Footage of elite paratroopers boarding aircraft, helicopters, and C-17 transport planes plays well on American television screens. It stirs patriotism and gives the impression of a decisive government ready to act. People watching in Florida, Texas, and across the country understand that these soldiers represent the best of America's fighting force, and the idea of them being positioned close to the source of the threat creates a sense of security. What makes this situation especially interesting is the balance between reality and speculation. Credible sources have confirmed naval deployments, air power movements, and even lethal strikes on suspected cartel vessels. At the same time, the notion of thousands of paratroopers in staging areas adds a dramatic twist that energizes discussions, especially on social media and in online communities that follow military developments closely. American audiences thrive on both the confirmed and the speculative because the combination keeps them on edge, wondering what the next step will be. Will there be airborne landings? Will special forces be inserted to neutralize high-value targets? Or is the entire operation a massive exercise in psychological warfare meant to make adversaries tremble without a single shot being fired? The United States has a long history of using military buildup as a diplomatic tool. From the Cuban Missile Crisis to operations in the Middle East, Washington understands that moving aircraft carriers, fighter squadrons, and airborne divisions creates leverage at the negotiating table. In this case, Venezuela is not just about drugs or regional stability, it is also about demonstrating to Russia and China that the Western Hemisphere remains under American influence. The deployment of paratroopers near Venezuela, whether real or exaggerated, feeds into this strategic calculation. It tells adversaries that the US is not afraid to put highly trained ground forces on standby, reminding the world of the rapid response capability that sets America apart from most militaries. Americans watching these developments are split in their reactions. Some see this as a necessary step to protect the homeland, applauding the military for taking a hard stance against cartels and corrupt regimes. Others worry about the risk of entanglement, fearing that this could spiral into another endless foreign intervention. Yet, even among skeptics, there is recognition that the sight of elite paratroopers mobilized carries weight. It is a powerful image that speaks to America's identity as a country willing to project strength when challenged. The media has seized on this narrative, amplifying the drama by showing maps of troop movements, animated graphics of paratrooper drops, and clips of F-35s soaring over the Caribbean. For US audiences, this is more than news, it is a reminder of their nation's role as a global superpower. Commentators compare it to historic moments when airborne divisions changed the course of conflicts, suggesting that if push comes to shove, the same could happen in Venezuela. The speculation alone captures attention, driving millions of views online and endless debates on talk shows and podcasts. The fact that an airstrike has already taken place, sinking a vessel linked to Tren de Aragua and killing several members, adds fuel to the fire. Americans hear that action has already begun, and many wonder whether this is only the opening move in a larger campaign. If thousands of paratroopers are indeed staged nearby, the logical question becomes whether they will be used to follow up on such strikes with ground operations. That possibility excites some and alarms others, but either way, it ensures that the US public remains deeply invested in what happens next. This operation also resonates with a deeper theme in American society, the constant fight against enemies who operate in the shadows. From Al-Qaeda to ISIS to transnational cartels, Americans have grown accustomed to the idea that threats are not always conventional armies but networks of criminals and extremists who destabilize regions. The deployment of elite paratroopers against such a threat sends a symbolic message that America will use the same level of force it once used against Nazi Germany or the Taliban against today's cartels. That symbolism is powerful for US audiences, who see it as proof that their country takes every threat seriously, no matter how unconventional. As the situation develops, the presence of American forces in the Caribbean is reshaping the political atmosphere across the hemisphere. Venezuela's government has loudly condemned the buildup, with President Nicolas Maduro declaring that the United States is plotting an invasion. He presents the image of paratroopers and Marines as proof that Washington wants regime change, not just counter-narcotics operations. For American viewers, these accusations may sound familiar, because they echo the rhetoric of past adversaries who accused the US of imperialism whenever American troops drew near. Yet, the irony is that by denying such ambitions, US officials only fuel speculation that something much bigger might be happening behind the scenes. The whispers of airborne units ready for action add to that uncertainty, keeping audiences both at home and abroad locked in a cycle of guessing what will come next. Inside the United States, the narrative is carefully managed to highlight both strength and restraint. Leaders want to show they are serious about protecting national interests, but they also avoid language that suggests open war. This balancing act creates suspense, which in turn captures the imagination of the public. Paratroopers are a perfect symbol for this kind of suspense. They are elite, mobile, and can be used surgically or in overwhelming numbers. For an American audience that grew up with movies, documentaries, and stories of heroic airborne drops, the mention of thousands of paratroopers stationed close to Venezuela is almost cinematic. It feels like history could repeat itself, and that sense of drama is exactly what makes people pay attention. The role of the media cannot be overstated in how this narrative is playing out. Television networks and online platforms are filling their screens with archival footage of paratroopers leaping from planes, mixed with satellite imagery of US naval formations near Venezuelan waters. Analysts speculate on air about what such troops could achieve if deployed, seizing airfields, securing cartel strongholds, or even storming government facilities if necessary. These scenarios may never materialize, but the very act of discussing them feeds into the sense of inevitability, as though the US military is on the verge of rewriting the story of Venezuela. For many Americans, this moment ties directly into the larger battle against drugs that has plagued their communities for decades. Parents who have lost children to overdoses see the buildup not as a geopolitical maneuver, but as justice. They imagine paratroopers cutting off the flow of narcotics before it reaches U.S. soil. Law enforcement officials praise the idea that cartels will no longer operate with impunity, facing instead the might of the world's most advanced military. In towns and cities across the United States, the thought that their soldiers are standing ready to deal with the problem at its source carries emotional weight. It transforms a distant foreign crisis into something personal and relevant. Still, the risks are enormous. Deploying thousands of troops near Venezuela creates the possibility of direct confrontation with not just criminal gangs but also Venezuelan security forces. Maduro has vowed to resist any incursion, and his military, though far weaker than America's, remains a force to be reckoned with on its home territory. For U.S. audiences, this raises the stakes. If paratroopers are ordered in, it would not be a bloodless mission. The specter of casualties looms, and that reality injects both fear and respect into the conversation. Americans understand the price of war, and while they admire their soldiers' bravery, they also hope that such a deployment can achieve results without spiraling into chaos. The geopolitical implications also play directly into American concerns about rival powers. Russia has supplied Venezuela with weapons and training, while China has invested heavily in its oil sector. If thousands of U.S. paratroopers are staged nearby, both Moscow and Beijing will be watching closely. For U.S. audiences, this frames the story not just as a regional conflict but as part of the larger rivalry with great powers. The image of paratroopers near Venezuela becomes a symbol of America's determination to prevent adversaries from establishing a foothold in its backyard. It recalls the Monroe Doctrine in spirit, reminding Americans that their nation has long claimed the Western Hemisphere as its sphere of influence. Speculation about potential operations adds fuel to this fire. Some experts suggest that paratroopers could be used in lightning raids against cartel leaders, quickly neutralizing their command structures. Others imagine them securing humanitarian corridors if Venezuela's economic collapse worsens. The most dramatic theories involve regime change scenarios, where airborne troops spearhead a broader intervention. Each of these possibilities carries different risks and benefits, and none are confirmed, but for an American audience the details matter less than the spectacle. The thought that paratroopers could be the tip of the spear in any of these missions keeps the story alive in public consciousness. The recent airstrike against a vessel linked to the Tren de Aragua gang only amplifies the drama. If the US is already willing to use lethal force, then the possibility of escalation becomes real. Americans ask themselves, was that strike a one-off warning, or is it the opening act of a longer campaign? The presence of paratroopers nearby makes the second option feel more likely. Even if official statements deny invasion plans, the combination of actions and assets tells a different story. For the U.S. audience, this creates tension, suspense, and a sense that history is unfolding right before their eyes. In the broader cultural imagination, American paratroopers hold a special place. They are seen as warriors who descend from the sky, striking fear into enemies and inspiring pride at home. From the 82nd Airborne Division to Special Operations Units, the legacy of airborne forces is one of courage and decisiveness. When Americans hear that thousands of such troops are now linked to operations near Venezuela, the association with past victories and sacrifices comes rushing back. It transforms the story from a dry policy issue into an emotional narrative of strength, honor, and national destiny. At the same time, critics within the United States are raising valid concerns. They ask whether this buildup truly serves American interests or whether it risks dragging the country into another foreign quagmire. They point out that drug cartels are resilient, often able to adapt and re-emerge even after leaders are taken out. They warn that military force alone may not solve the deeper problems driving the drug trade and Venezuela's instability. Yet even these criticisms contribute to the visibility of the story. For U.S. audiences, the debate itself is captivating, because it touches on fundamental questions about America's role in the world and the use of its military power. The Biden administration, or whichever leadership is at the helm, faces a delicate balance in managing both the domestic audience and international perception. On one hand, it must reassure Americans that their sacrifices are not in vain and that every soldier deployed is serving a clear and achievable mission. On the other hand, it must prevent adversaries from miscalculating the situation as a prelude to full-scale invasion. The ambiguity created by the mention of thousands of paratroopers plays into this balance. It allows the US to project strength without committing to a specific course of action, keeping opponents guessing while maintaining public interest. For ordinary Americans, the story has already taken hold. In cafes, gyms, and online forums, people are discussing the paratrooper deployment as though it were the plot of a blockbuster movie. Some cheer the idea of decisive action, others express worry about unintended consequences, but few can resist the drama of it all. That drama is what keeps them glued to the news, sharing articles and videos, and speculating about what the next move will be. In a nation where attention is a powerful currency, the story of paratroopers near Venezuela has already achieved something significant. It has captured the American imagination.